Did you know the Ancestral Kitchen podcast has a thriving online community? Patreon members love our private group discussion forum, away from the noise of mainstream social media. In this group, conversations brim with ideas, recipes, humor, and thoughtful discussion of member questions. There's a bonus exclusive podcast where Alison and I answer member questions and talk more informally about our kitchens and our lives. This private podcast also includes after-show tidbits with guests, everything we didn't dare say on the main feed, and all the extra stuff we couldn't fit into the primary episodes. There's a monthly live chat where we get together with members, and afterwards the recording goes up in the private podcast feed for members to listen in later. Come and be a part of a group that will befriend, encourage, and support you and your kitchen endeavors. We'd love to have you join us. Find all the details at ancestralkitchenpodcast.com. What about cooking and eating ancestrally when you're in times of turmoil or busy, chaotic times, like having a new baby, or when people are sick, or when you're moving across countries? In this episode, Alison and I are going to talk about all of these things because we are going through all of them. And we will share some of our strategies and plans for using up food stores before a move, or preparing food in advance when there's a baby coming, and how we're going to keep our systems running despite all of the disruption going on in our normal life. Thank you to those of you who sent in the questions that inspired this episode. It's a really good one, and I think you'll find it very useful. Welcome to the Ancestral Kitchen. Yeah, it's all coming together. Okay.
Indeed.
Oh,
Indeed.
all right. Just lost my train of thought. I was going to read a review before we start.
What did you have to eat? We haven't talked about that yet.
Yeah, but then I was going to say, wait a minute, what did you eat? Because then I thought, what did I eat? I didn't eat anything yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. Do you want to tell us what you had last night or not?
Sure. Yeah, actually, I should say something that I had last night because it relates to something we're going to say later.
Okay.
I had yes, again, it'll make sense when we get to the end. I had this ranch dressing that I got the recipe from Rebecca, who has the account on Instagram, A Humble Place, website by the same name, has been on this podcast. So you interviewed her
a few podcasts back. Yeah.
Yep. So if you heard that episode, then you know how I got the recipe. But I got this recipe for ranch dressing from her, and I made a salad because, Alison, I know I made the mistake of saying on air one time that I don't really like salads.
You had a
and
salad.
Everybody has given me grief for it ever since. But this pregnancy, I've craved salad for several months, which is just okay, whatever. Probably the least digestible thing I could go for. But I'm putting kefir on it. So,
in the ranch dressing, you mean?
Yeah. So I feel like that balances it a little bit. So I just made a chopped salad last night with, lettuce, radishes are coming in around here.
Okay.
Apples. What else did I put on?
Radish and apples, nice.
And yeah. And then the ranch dressing is a bunch of herbs and smashed garlic and little lemon juice mixed in with milk kefir. And I just make kind of a big jug of it and stick it in the fridge. And it does it does separate after a while if you're not using it every single day.
Just stir it back together.
Yeah, but it's a really nice sauce that can kind of go with anything. Yeah, so Gary loves it. I love it. So
sounds lovely.
Yeah. So there we go. What did you have?
We had rabbit.
Wasn't expecting that.
Unusual, wasn't it? Yeah, you weren't expecting that one. I wanted a chicken from Flavio last time we went to pick up some meat from him, and he doesn't have any at the moment. But he said, I might be able to get you a rabbit. So I said, yes, please, because we used to get them quite a lot when we were in England.
Yeah.
And I like them. So we had a rabbit, and I split it. We split it into 3 kind of sections and froze them separately. And then there was an offal section as well. And I got one of those out today. It was the kind of a bit with some ribs and one of the limbs, I think probably front legs. And then I put that in some water and gently cooked it for about 50 minutes. And I had on the side some sticky white rice, which was delicious.
Yum.
And also some agretti, which are a vegetable I hadn't heard of before I came to Italy, but I have talked about on the podcast before. So I shall test your knowledge now, Andrea, whether you listen to me. They are.
Without paying attention.
They are kind of look like a really thick, long green grass. I guess they most remind me of samphire coming from the UK, which are a kind of salt flats. Samphire is a vegetable that grows on salt marshes. It's very salty. Agretti isn't so salty. It looks like kind of thick strands of hair, like really thin green pasta, perhaps. And it's got such a nice taste. And it's one of my favourite Italian kind of things when it comes in. And I put the cast iron pan on, put some lard in, fried a small red onion, which I chopped up into little bits, put the agretti in there and kind of stirred it all around. Just cooked it for 6 or 7 minutes. And had that with the rabbit, which we picked off the bone, and the rice. What's quite funny about the rabbit is that earlier on in the week, I got the bag out that I thought had the offal in, and I was expecting lungs, heart, kidneys, liver, and I hadn't really seen what was in it when I put it in the freezer. I opened it up and got everything out of the bag, and there was a rabbit head in there. I was like, oh gosh, I've got a head. Okay, nice. So Rob will be eating the head then. So I just had the pan ready to fry liver and heart. So the head just went in half in the pan, and I cooked it for a bit longer. So make sure it was cooked through. And then Rob literally ate a rabbit head and picked off all the bits of it, whilst I ate the liver and the heart.
Nice. How much does the rabbit weigh?
That's a good question. I didn't weigh. It wasn't a very big one. I would say, I'm going to talk English now, aren't you? I would say probably kilo and a half, maybe. Okay. So that's what's that to you? That's like £3, isn't it? I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little. It was quite a small £3
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's not bad
nice
for a rabbit, though.
Yeah, the first batch I did, and I made a pasta for Gabriel, and he was a bit tentative because he anthropomorphizes rabbits a lot, and a lot of his books do. So we don't eat that regularly. So he's really into Brer Rabbit, Enid Blyton's Brer Rabbit. I mean, he has listened to it for about, 2/3 of his life now, and he knows all the stories off by heart.
Which one? Brer Rabbit, you said?
Brer Rabbit, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's American.
And so, yeah, he absolutely loves it. So he was a bit tentative, but I put his in a kind of this pasta dish that he made a sauce for, and he chose some herbs from the garden, and he loved it too. So,
good.
Anyway.
That's good. Yeah. Well, Mr. McGregor, Peter's father and his wife put him in a pie. So, yeah. Shouldn't we take a page from their book?
Well, exactly.
Well, that's cool. How nice.
It was tasty.
Well, so I actually was going to read, Alison, this review from Justine, which was about your spelt cookbook.
Okay.
Yeah.
That would be nice to hear.
Yes, she hated it. Just kidding. Right. She says, Justine is a patron of the podcast. And she said, I made the switch recently from modern grains to spelt, and what a difference. The taste is lovely, and I have found it much easier to work with than red and white grains. Alison has written these recipes so clearly, and the pictures are beautiful and inspiring. In the past, I've wasted so much time on the internet trying to find whole grain recipes. It's nearly impossible. This recipe book has all you need in one beautiful place.
Oh, thank you, Justine.
That's a good review. I know her in real life, and she does speak in all caps sometimes. So that's why some of her reviews in all caps.
I've seen some pictures of what she's baked from the book on the Discord forum.
I know.
And it's just wonderful to hear how much she loves the recipes in there.
Yep. And she is right. Finding whole grain recipes. Usually if you find a recipe that says whole grain, it has whole grain in it, but also like a refined bread flour or something. So so the titles can be a little deceiving sometimes.
The book is linked in the show notes, and if you want to get yourself a copy, you can find it at our website, ancestralkitchenpodcast.com.
Yep.
So what's been happening on the Discord, apart from talking about
quite the place.
My book?
Yeah.
What's been happening?
Gossiping about you? Oh, yeah. So one thing that has been a topic in Discord, so that Discord is the non-social media forum platform that we use so that we can all discuss things but not get hammered with 4,000 updates and walls and feeds and pages and whatever all the things are that happen on social media that you and I just got overwhelmed with. So in Discord, we've been talking about fermentation failures and troubleshooting with each other. And it's interesting how sometimes it's like when we had that long conversation about the water kefir, and then you and I ended up talking to the King Sandor Katz and asking him that question, and he kind of had the answer for us. And it was interesting that I don't know, all the discussion and then Francie's experiments and stuff all came together for that. So
there's been a lot of heavy work on water kefir in there. I mean, like, seriously, it felt to me like cutting edge water kefir work.
I know. And honestly, the thing is, I've done so much Googling on water kefir on things, and nobody was saying any of those things that we were finding. And literally, if you I would get so frustrated because I was looking at milk kefir and they'd say, well, if your grains aren't populating, you're not doing it right. And I was like, no, that is not the answer. That is wrong. So it's been really gratifying having the group. Everybody's kind of got a little bit of this scientific side to them where they want to learn and know, which is interesting. So, and another thing that I like in there is that we made a thread where we just post what we're eating, because you and I always say what we're eating, and so patrons can post what they're eating.
Dishes.
Yeah. And then sometimes everybody's like, okay, please tell me how, so we can share the recipe.
I love seeing Amelia's dish that she posted in there recently with millet.
Which one?
Because all the patrons have been making things with millet after the millet recipe, and my slow cooked beef heart. Those two things together on the plate. I thought, oh, wow.
It looks really good. Yeah. And then Marisa made those muffins with mulberries.
Yeah, I saw those.
Yeah, I would love to try mulberries one day. I only know them from the song "Round and Round the Mulberry Bush."
No, I've tasted them. They're lovely.
Yeah, there's lots of expertise in there that goes from, you knowing like all these insane things and us debating things, and then you coming in and being like, it's 12%. I'm like, oh, okay.
No, well, there's loads of other people who know loads more about other things than me.
Yeah, but then there's also those of us that are beginners on lots of things, and I don't know, there's just a lot of different knowledge. And then there's cool book recommendations happening too. Some of the recent book recommendations was Francine recommended Deep Nutrition, which I started, and now I've been hearing about elsewhere, and it is really fascinating. And then Hannah and Justine both recommended Ultra Processed People, which I would like to read next. Or actually, I found audio of it, and sounds really fascinating. And then we had our KTC live last weekend, which was so fun. And me and Francine and Nick ended up staying on for like an hour after everybody left.
Just chat
talking.
forever.
Yeah, it was just fun.
Nice.
And then I also wanted to give a shout out to Jay. That is Justine's husband. He handmade this beautiful cedar bread knife for us, and
Wow.
it's amazing.
Oh, wow.
I've
That's
never
beautiful.
had a knife like this. I'll have to post a picture in the Discord.
Yeah,
but
do.
I've never had a knife like this, and I gasped when I cut a loaf of bread. It was so easy. I was like, what?
Nice.
So anyway, yeah, let's go to our topic, Allison.
Yeah. Let's do.
Yeah, this all kind of relates to, we've been discussing some of this in the Discord as well. So feels like
Yeah, it relates to all the big
the
things
patrons'
that are happening
conversations are in my head as we're
to
having
both
this
of us this
conversation.
year.
Yeah.
And we kind of realised we've been talking to patrons about things, and then we hadn't actually even mentioned it on the podcast, and it was about time we had.
It feels like everybody knows, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to introduce us, or do you want me to?
Yeah, no, let me lead us in, and then I'm gonna
Cool.
I have some questions for you. And so we'll just go that way. So
Right.
You and I both have some significant life changes happening at the same time, which is just weird because you and I are always synced up like that. And you are moving from Italy to the UK, which is huge. And I'm having a new baby, which is also huge. So hopefully it's not that huge, maybe not more than 8 pounds. But we are changing our lives a lot. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, I had a lot of questions for you, kind of based on conversations we've had, but do you want me to just ask you, or do you want to just start telling us about
I think
I want to talk about how we I realized I didn't actually say the question, which was I wanted to talk about how we cook and eat during these times when there's just upheaval, or you're moving, or people are sick, or there's a new baby, and how do you find food? Because obviously it's going to be a little challenging. You can't just order takeout. Yeah. And how do we keep making the things that we love? Do we keep making the things that we love?
Okay.
And especially with you traveling.
Okay, me traveling as well as moving. That's the kind of difference there, isn't it? Yeah. So I'm moving in 6 weeks' time, completely from
is it
Italy.
Really that close?
Yeah, leaving Italy and going back to the UK, probably permanently. That's the kind of idea. I can't imagine us coming back here. So we are just shifting our entire life. And we do not know yet where we're going to live. So we don't even have kind of a place where we know or where we don't know that we can investigate. So the first thing really that I'm thinking about around that is that I've got to eat everything that's in my house in 6 weeks' time. Otherwise it's going to be thrown away, because all our stuff is going into storage and you can't put food in storage.
Yep.
So literally everything has to be used. And because we buy in bulk, most things, grains and nuts, and we buy our meat from Flavio every 2 weeks, it takes a lot of planning. I had to sit down and go, right, how many weeks have we got left? How many kilos of oats, sorghum, millet, rye, spelt have we got? And how much of that do we eat each week? And therefore, how long do I think that's going to last us? And then, can I buy enough to make it worth my while in bulk for the remaining time? So that's been kind of lots of scribblings in notebooks and calculators and things like that. And I've tried to buy the right amount to keep us going until we leave. But really what I'm doing now is simplifying as much as possible. So I know what we've got left. I know what we've got to eat, and we're eating that. So we're not buying anything kind of separately, or anything speculatively, or anything kind of for fun, as it were, We're just making sure that we eat the staples that we've got. In addition to the grains, which I kind of focus on, I've also got to eat my freezer down. The freezer's quite small, but I've got to think about lard. I've got to think about the meat that's in there. I've got to think about the things like whey cubes that are in there, if I don't want to waste them. There's cream in there, that kind of thing. And, I've got a cupboard with bits and bobs of food in, oils, olive oil. I've got coconut oil in there, things like that I'm kind of balancing the sugar for the water kefir. And then I've got a spice rack full of spices, honey, molasses, cacao, all those sorts of things that I know that unless we can get them in our hand luggage, which really is very unlikely because there's going to be big pressure on our hand luggage, I've got to use them or give them away.
Yeah.
So, the cacao grains are getting the cacao beans are being roasted up and Rob's eating them every day so he can finish them. And I'm thinking about those spices, because I've built up quite a large collection of spices and I'm really sad to let go of some of them.
Too.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like that about the garden. I've spent quite a long time building that and I'm sad to let that go. But I'm focusing on, what is most important? What can I give away? What can I use? And in addition, we do want to have some things to take with us. So we usually take sauerkraut and lard when we go on a journey, and we will be taking sauerkraut and lard to keep us going on that first kind of period in the UK. I've done that many times before, so I'm planning for that now. When do I need to buy back fat from my farmer, from Flavio? When do I need to render the fat? How much can we manage to fit in the case? And how much sauerkraut can we manage? Bearing in mind, we've only got 2 cases when we actually move. So I'm just planning. Do you have any questions on that? If not, I'll move on to the next.
I do actually. So you're not spending money on food right now, really?
No.
Other than maybe minimally.
Yes.
But when you get to where you're going, you're going to have to suddenly start spending money on food. So is that factoring into your plan too? Like, hey, we would have normally spent this. We have to set it aside from when we get to where we're going, or how does that work?
You would think that I would be doing that, wouldn't you? But unfortunately, we're not that organised in our planning, really, because at the moment we're just trying to absorb all the costs of moving because there are huge costs in moving. Insane. Really, the biggest cost is moving our stuff, getting someone to... We don't have much stuff. We really don't.
No, you don't.
We sleep on tatami mats. We don't have beds. We don't have a TV. We don't have big units. We don't have shelves. We don't have a lot of stuff compared to a normal house. But still, the moving that, someone has to drive it from Italy to the UK. And that's the priciest thing. So at the moment, we're just trying to absorb the costs of moving. And when we first come back to the UK, we'll be staying with Rob's mum. And so that will give us a bit of leeway because we won't be paying any rent for that period. That will give us a little bit of leeway to be able to absorb the extra kind of uncomfortable expense that buying things without having a long, a supply chain like that established will cost. So we're not actually factoring that in. I'd like to think we could if we ever move again.
It sounds like though with the not paying rent initially, you're going to kind of come out even. So
hopefully that's the hope.
Okay. So you'll be living with them for a little bit while you're shopping for a place to live.
Yeah, that's right.
How's that? That's strange kitchen and everything.
That's going to be hard because anyone who's listening who's cooking this way knows how important it is to have that bowl where you want it and have your knife and, be able to turn from there to there and reach across and put something in a pan without even thinking about it. That's how you get to be kind of unconscious in the kitchens. You just work automatically based on how your system is arranged. And having a small kitchen here, that's been vital to me. Whereas I'm going to be in an unfamiliar kitchen, my tools are going to be in storage. As we talked, I'm not going to have any reliable sources for my food. It's going to be a challenge, but we have done it for periods in summers before. So I've kind of learnt what's important and what's not. And for me, really, I've got to clarify what's most important to me and us and make sure I set my own expectations correctly and expectations of Rob and Gabriel for what's going to be possible. So I'm going to be keeping it really, really simple there.
Yeah.
It's not the time to start experimenting or doing things differently. I'm going to be having a certain number of dishes that I just put on repeat.
It's a wise note.
And when I say, what's most important, what if anyone's going through this or going through a disjointed time, even going through a busy time, thinking about what are the essentials in my output in the kitchen for me. If I could only do 2 or 3 things, what are they? Is it sourdough? Is it sauerkraut? Is it that you render your own fat? Is it the meat that you get? Determine that, because you won't be able to do everything. I won't be able to do everything. So when we're at Rob's mum's house, I won't be grinding any grain. I won't be making suans. I won't be rolling my oats. And I won't be doing oat goodies there. I'll be compromising in that period of time and making things that are really simple. For us, lard is really important. Water kefir is really important. And sauerkraut is really important. And I'll put a link to the show notes to an article that I wrote last year, I think, where I talked about how I managed those 3 things in an unfamiliar kitchen without the same equipment that I'm used to having for them. So I'll be focusing on finding fat so I can render it into lard, focusing on keeping that water kefir routine, and focusing on making sure there's sauerkraut. I will pack a few things in my case for that time that are essential to me. So my knife, I can't work without my knife.
No.
And I've got a silicone loaf tin, which I use to make breads in, but it can double as kind of a thing to put vegetables in the oven, that kind of thing. So I'll be taking those with me. I'll also be taking my starters with me. So it's not just us moving, it's a ton of starters moving. So I'll be taking I'll be taking my sourdough starter with me. I actually dehydrated some of that for the first time last month. And so I'll be taking a live one and a bit of dehydrated one.
Okay.
And then I'll be taking water kefir grains, milk kefir grains, and my Boza starter as well.
Okay.
So those will come with us in the case in glass jars, packed up well, with the lid screwed on, but also in double bags so they don't leak in the case.
Pro tip.
So all of those,
like she knows,
will be coming with us. Yes, exactly. And then open them over the sink when you get there the other side, because even if you've got a Tupperware that is a double lock one, the pressure in the cabin of an aeroplane, which we are traveling on, will make everything leak everywhere. So
100%.
Exactly.
Ask us how we know. Also, listeners who are joining as patrons can go back in time and listen to the kitchen table chat number 26. In there, Alison, you talked about your trip to England in the summer of 2023.
Yeah.
Yep. And you went over some of this in a bit more detail. So the way you were cooking in the kitchen, experiences with like different ovens, different proofing times and things like that. So if people want to know even more, then they can
and also we did a Patreon episode just recently on these big changes in our life, where we talked about the kind of why I'm moving, what factors have played into it, how I'm feeling about it, and what it's going to mean for all of us. And we talked about your pregnancy and how that's affected everything in your family, and that's kind of an in-depth, just like the KTC recordings are kind of more intimate. And
if you want to really hear our heart and expose all our vulnerabilities, you can go listen to that one.
Yeah. So that's where we're at, really.
Okay.
And what else do you want me to cover?
So you're going to have the food budget like we talked about, but also when you get there, you're kind of buying food a la carte in the beginning, which is more expensive. You and I both know, because we've both built our budgets around being able to economize with size and things like that.
Yes, completely.
So
That's going to be a challenge,
challenge,
but it's just part of it,
Yeah, yeah, and just taking it as part of the scene is okay. Do you look for, like, are you already researching places to shop when you get there, or no?
I know vaguely what is available at Rob's mum's house because I've been there before, so I don't have to do that. But when we go looking for somewhere new to live, we're going to be investigating places we have never been before.
Right.
Okay. I am already kind of looking at those with a mind to, do we want to live here? Because is there a good food sources? Are there good food sources locally? So I'm already kind of thinking, well, if there's nothing in the local area, there's not a good food scene, I don't know if I want to live there. So when we get closer to when we've decided where we want to move to, I will be investigating really quite seriously, what's there in terms of farmers markets, who are the people who sell at those farmers markets, where are those farms, can I find those farms independently of the farmers markets, have they got a sales online, what do they do, how do they raise their animals, what sort of rotations do they have, how far are they from where we're going to be living, will we be able to get there, or do they do kind of drop off things? I'll be looking at lots and lots of different farms for, milk, raw milk, meat, and then looking at mills as well for grains. Often what I do is, and I'm sure we'll do this when we visit the towns, which we're going to, because we're going to go there and say, do we want to live here or not? I find a health food store, and I go into the health food store and I just start talking to the person.
Good idea.
And I talk to them about the local area. We'll probably talk to them about homeschooling, which is the what we're going to be doing with Gabriel. And we'll talk to them about where can you access things, what's the scene like. That's been my sort of tactic for quite some time. I find the local health food store and I go in there and I just start talking to the person or the people who work there. The other thing I'll probably do is look up online and see if there's a Western Price chapter in the area, and potentially contact the person who's running that and ask them. And Google's really, it does the job. Most farms in the UK have a presence online that's quite clear, and so I'll be using that. Yeah. So that's a lot of work. I remember what it was like coming here and trying to find food sources here. I mean, it was harder here because, Italian's not my native language, and not so many Italian businesses have an online presence, or perhaps it's not searchable so easily. But it took me a long time to find Flavio. It took me a long time to find a mill that I was happy with. So I know, what it's like for any listener who does move around or is moving. You've got to factor in time and, try not to get downhearted by the amount of work you have to put into that. It's part of this life, isn't it? This lifestyle.
And if anybody doesn't know, when you referred to the Weston A. Price chapter, there's Weston A. Price chapters all over the place, and one of the jobs of a chapter leader is to maintain a current list of local resources for things like, raw milk or meat or eggs, things that might be available in the area. So that is a really good resource. Not all of them are as good as the other might be, some are better maintained than others, but that is a good resource. And sometimes you just have to get ready to start island hopping. Like, you find one farm and then it's someone with a website, but it ends up networking you over to their cousin's farm who doesn't have a website or something. So yeah. Okay. Exactly. Well, that's awesome, Alison. It's for anybody who's wondering, it's a lot of work. Yeah. If you're thinking, how do you guys do it?
Well, our lives don't run straight, do they? There are always these times when we're moving or something's happening and it's disjointed, and those things come. And because I've been able to go and stay in the UK for extended periods of time, and I've lived with Rob's mum for periods of time as well, and moved around a lot, like a lot more than I've wanted to. Yeah, I've had to learn to do this.
Yeah. And I know it's possible. I know we've done it too. And every time we move, the first things I look for is usually milk, eggs, and meat. Because if I have those things, I can build around them, and veggies. And usually, sometimes you find a farm that does more than one of those things, and that's nice.
Yeah, makes it easier. So, yeah. Do you want me to talk about actually traveling? And when we're flying, I talked a little bit about packing things in a suitcase, but there's some other things I could share there.
Yeah, actually, that would be nice because that is something we do get asked fairly frequently. So I think it would be good if you covered that.
Yeah, so I did say be careful of the seals because things don't seal properly. Remember, you can dehydrate. So, like, I'm taking sourdough starter that's dehydrated. That would probably be enough. You don't necessarily have to take sourdough starter that's fresh. Plan beforehand what's going in your case, because if you're taking glass jars, you need to make sure you wrap them up and put them in the middle of the case. You don't want to be putting them in at 5 o'clock in the morning, of the day that you're traveling, because you'll end up getting them smashed. You remember also that you can put frozen stuff in a case. So the lard that we'll travel with, the lard that we'll travel with will come straight from the freezer. I'll make the lard, I'll freeze it, it will stay in the freezer till the morning that we leave, and then it will get taken out, put inside a plastic bag and put in our case, and then by the time we get home to England, it will be virtually defrosted.
So you're not traveling from Italy to the UK, you're just defrosting lard.
Exactly, I'm defrosting some lard, and I just end up being another place when it's finished defrosting.
Perfect.
And for the journey, obviously we're taking food for the journey as well. So we always make sure we have an ice block in our things because it's usually very hot here. And then you obviously can't take that on the plane in your luggage. So then we get to the airport earlier. We eat the stuff that's in the cool bag. We take the ice block out of the hand luggage cool bag and we stow it in the suitcase that's going in the hold before we check in, and then we don't need to have that with us.
Okay. And then when you get off the plane, basically do you have like another meal for
usually So usually we've got another meal, and that's the thing that we will take that we know doesn't need keeping cool. So if we've got something that we want to keep cool,
like what?
Like if maybe we've got some an egg or some fish or something, we will eat that as our first meal on the day of traveling, with the ice block still keeping it cool. And then later on, we will probably eat something like cheese and bread that doesn't need to have had, and a piece of fruit that doesn't need to have been kept cold.
Perfect.
So what I would say, just generally overall, if you're moving or you're busy, we're going to move on to talk about busy in a sec. The most important thing is to work out your priorities and focus on those. What's most important to you? Make things as simple as possible. It will drive you insane trying to do too much. It doesn't matter if you eat repeated meals, the same thing every night at supper for 3 weeks. It doesn't matter. You'll get through it. Just make it as simple as possible and then plan. Think ahead and plan. Those are my kind of 3 things I would say about that.
If you've been around ancestral food for very long or listened to the podcast for just a few episodes, you know liver is a superfood, and Alison and I both love it. You're looking at a food packed with vitamins A, K, a broad spectrum of B vitamins, CoQ10, bioavailable iron, plus many essential minerals. Liver is your first stop when seeking to gain energy and restore your health. Not only is it a delicacy and staple of traditional diets, it's the first thing most animal predators go for when they're hunting. Are you looking for a good way to work liver into your daily life, but getting it on the table just isn't happening yet or as much as you'd like? Or maybe, like I went through earlier this year, you're pregnant and you're pretty sick and not much food is staying down. This is where liver capsules come in. Alison and I are both supplementing our ancestral diets with liver capsules from One Earth Health. We get all the incredible benefits of liver, even when we're on the road, or preparing non-liver meals for our family, or we just can't get a hold of a liver, and the sourcing and preparation has all been handled for us. One Earth Health produces nutritious organ capsules from 100% grass-fed, New Zealand-raised cattle. Support the pod by purchasing through our link. You'll get 15% off your first order and 5% off subsequent orders. Go to ancestralkitchenpodcast.com/liver or check the show notes. Well, that is wise advice, Allison. And I think that what you said about priorities, making it as simple as possible, or prioritizing and making it as simple as possible in planning applies to what we're going to talk about now, too.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to hand over to you really for this one, and I'm going to be the one asking you questions. So tell us what's going on for you.
Morning sickness that lasts 24 hours a day for 40 weeks.
It's been awful to see what you're going through with morning sickness. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I will take all your sympathy. Yeah, well, it's been awful for seeing you, Allison, going through all these agonizing decision making and things. So I think we've both been feeling for each other.
Yeah.
So, we're both going through a separate but equal pain.
Yeah.
So, being sick all the time and sick to the point of debilitated. Like, I don't really remember October or December. And severe dehydration from being sick constantly, losing weight for months when you're pregnant and you feel like you're supposed to be gaining weight. But so there, I'm totally honest, there was times that I had no idea what everybody was eating and I didn't care. I didn't even know what time of day it was. It's like, are they eating? I guess. So we didn't bake bread for probably 6 months.
Wow.
I know, you're thinking, how did you survive?
Yeah.
So as an indicator of just how crazy things were, my mom was bringing food over. The kids were cooking. Gary was cooking. And even I don't typically need Gary to take time off of his job because I'm sick. As if, for instance, when Camille was born, she was born at home. We went to bed at midnight and he went to bed at 6 a.m. Or he went to work at 6 a.m. the next day.
Yeah, wow.
Like, I'm barely capable. But he actually had to take some time off. That's how bad this was.
Gosh.
And he was worried that I wasn't going to be okay. And then I remember some nights that he was calling the kids every 30 minutes. Okay, how does she look? What's she doing? And then my mom would call him, should I go over there? And so my mom ended up, I'm so grateful that we lived close enough to my mom that she was able to come. She would go shopping and bring bags of food over, or she would make food, or she would come over and make food. And then the kids were cooking. They're pretty competent. They can make things on the stove or bake things. And
so give me some examples of what they were making.
Okay, things the kids can make. All right, rice, scrambled eggs, fried eggs, egg sandwiches if mom was bringing bread. Well, now I'm drawing a total blank, but
simple foods. Again, we're back to simple foods, aren't we, really?
Yeah, the kids are competent enough that when I tell them to play outside and don't come inside, or I'll give them chores, they will start a fire and collect eggs and cook themselves eggs on the fire. Like, they're okay.
Nice. And so was the food okay? I mean, I don't know whether you were eating it or you were trying to eat it. Was the food good? And what happened to shopping for food as well?
Yeah. So on the one hand, we have a substantial pantry. On the other hand, our pantry is basically made out of one ingredient foods. And I wasn't present with my brain enough to be like, get this out, soak it. This is where the whey is. And so that's why I wasn't even trying to explain, here's how to grind flour. There was a couple times that I was just laying on the couch and like almost whispering and telling the kids, okay, go here, get this, put this together, trying to tell them what to do. But we ended up getting, I would ask mom specifically, like, could you get something that was already prepared that somebody could just put in the oven? And she found the best versions of what kind of exists out there, but nothing competes. Nothing can even compete with homemade food, not even a little bit.
So you do think if you were to get pregnant again, would you try to plan to have a pantry that has kind of canned meals in it?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
okay.
told mom this is so much harder than postpartum has ever been. And I feel like I need to prepare more for the 9 months of pregnancy than I do for the postpartum period. But some of the good things that came out of this, there's many good things, and Lord willing, there will be a baby as well.
There will be a very big good thing. In a few
I just kept
weeks'
telling
time.
myself, there's a prize at the end of this. There's a prize. There's a prize. Just hang in there. And also I considered, as hard as everything was, I knew exactly what was causing the issue, and I pretty much knew when it was going to end. And that colors your experience of pain and sickness in a big way, as you know. Like, having some answers helps.
Definitely.
But
it feels like your mum has been an absolute godsend to you. What would you suggest for people who don't have like relatives or friends close by? What can they do to help in a situation like this?
Yeah, that's really hard, because I don't know. I was not here in this state for my first 2 pregnancies. Well, actually, I was here for quite a lot of Jacob's pregnancy, because Gary was in various Navy trainings. But I had less people to look out for at that time. Like, it was just me. So I could eat like a teaspoon of rice, throw it up, and go back to bed. It was fine. So for reference, I'm always sick when I'm pregnant, but it does seem like it gets a little worse each time. And I've never had a farm before while being pregnant, so I don't know. I feel that building a community is an important aspect of the paradigm of ancestral food. And part of the reason is because ancestral food doesn't exist in a vacuum of time and space. We're drawing from traditions that come directly from group settings, if that makes sense. So there would be 2 women grinding grain together. One is taken and the other is left. Immediately comes to my mind. But there would be women grinding grain together, grandmothers, mothers, the mean old lady next door, whatever. And independent living and isolating ourselves from others and not needing other people has become a pretty central part of our cultures, both yours and mine. And
and it's reinforced by social media, unfortunately.
Very much so. Very much so. And I think back to what you said about simplify, it wasn't that I was consciously planning, let's simplify. It was just that we didn't really have a choice. And so I wasn't trying to achieve any sort of complex feast or something like that. I just was trying to get protein and calories and so far as I could into people. I really feel like, I don't know, on the one hand, I feel like I wasn't that successful at cooking during this time, because I genuinely don't even, like, I'd have to ask them, what were you guys eating? Because I don't even remember. Hannah said at one point, okay, I'm coming over to take care of you for a little bit. And she came over, and that was good because, and my friend Karen came out too for a little bit. They would make me like a fried egg and then sit there and wait for me to eat it so that they would know I actually ate it. Or like a cup of broth. And Hannah always puts a little sauerkraut juice in it, some sauerkraut on top.
Mhm.
And that was good because that can keep you going for a while.
I think if if listeners are able to plan at the very early stages of pregnancy, or even before pregnancy, when they know they want to become pregnant, then that's the time to start looking for a network and building a network, and building community is something that takes time and takes energy, because it's about giving as well as receiving. And so to actually have the forethought to think, okay, I want to get pregnant and I don't have a community around me, and I want a community anyway, because Ancestral Food is all about community. It's then taking the steps to reach out. Maybe if there's a Western Price chapter, going and going to one of their meetings, or going to the farmers market and talking to everyone, going to places like, the health food stores that I visit when I move, and talking to people, seeing what's going on and reaching out, which is challenging sometimes, but once that community is created, it's incredibly supportive. It can be an amazing space to be in.
And do you remember, Alison, when we recorded the episode on the private patron feed where we talked about this, both you and me, what we were going through specifically? And I talked about the blood work that I did, and I talked about, building up nutrient stores during your healthy, good times, because then when something happens like this, like you can't eat, say, anything for 2 months, your body has something to draw on. Your community is a lot like that. It's not that in the utilitarian sense, you build a community so that they'll be there for you when you need them. But that is, in effect, how it works. We invest into a bank account, or our liver's health, or our community, the health of our relationships. And then when something happens, because there have been multiple people who brought us food, and that that is something that I think is really important, and probably not talked about as often as, how long does sauerkraut sit on the counter before you have to move it into the fridge? But it's just as relevant to your ancestral food experience. And unfortunately, sometimes our personal growth, like, well, you're going to have to learn to get along with people. So Colleen's been baking for me. Actually, she's made us some delicious bagels and things that she knows I'm craving. And I was just talking to her and Sabrina the other day, and I was saying, I am not getting anything done. I've put one freezer meal in the freezer in anticipation of postpartum because I'm just barely moving forward. And we kind of came up with a plan that I'm going to send some of my frozen birds home with Colleen, and she's going to roast them and just shred the meat, because shredded roasted meat is easy. You can serve that with a piece of bread and cheese. You can put that with a bowl of rice. You can put it with a potato or whatever. Or you can just have it by itself or put it in some broth. And so she could be doing, I told her, I said, we have full freezers of meat because we anticipated we were butchering everything and packing it in the freezers so that we have the food available, but it needs to be converted into the value added product.
Exactly. So talk about the app that you've been using, because you've been telling me about this app.
Okay, so I alluded to it with the ranch dressing. So if you heard the episode with Rebecca, she told me about this app called Plan to Eat. And the name makes me chuckle because, Alison, you have met my brain, and you know that it's similar to scrambled eggs on a good day. And the idea of, like, well, you're going to eat, so plan to eat. It's like, yeah, duh, of course I am. So this is an app that she uses that I have started using, and I'm probably pretty well addicted to now. But it I don't even know how to explain in so many words why it has helped my brain so much. Probably I'll talk about it later in another episode too. But it is an app where you can type in your recipes and you can make them private or public, and you can put links to, like Alison, I could put like a link to your blog and it'll pull the recipe off of it and put it in the app. And then I save those recipes in there, and then I can sort them into days. And I'm a very visual person, so seeing everything laid out is very helpful. And then something Rebecca told me was also, then you can go back in March and see what you ate in March. And since we eat pretty rotationally, then that's actually very helpful because I can see, well, this was or was not, in season at that time. So one thing I've been doing with the Plan to Eat app is actually writing down recipes the way I make them, because there's a lot of recipes that I make out of Nourishing Traditions or the Nourishing Traditions for Children cookbook or our cookbook or whatever, that I don't exactly follow them the way they're written, but in my head, I just know what I do differently.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're the same way.
Yeah.
And so you look like you're following the recipe because you're glancing at it or referring to it, but in your head, you're totally doing something different. I don't know if anybody else does that, but I've been writing them down in the app the way I make them because I'm trying to get my brain out of my head, for what it's worth, and into the app so that other people, whether it's my mom or Gary or the kids, can look. I can say, yeah, we have, I would like oatmeal tomorrow. So, and then the app is kind of built for people like us because you can put in there little like prep notes. So if I put lacto fermented oats on the menu for tomorrow, then it has a prep note for today. Put the oats into soak.
I see. Okay.
And so you know what's coming. And then you can also plan it as a leftover. Like I might say, we're going to double the batch, which you can make that as a note and it'll automatically increase all your quantities. And then I can plan and say, and this will be eaten as leftovers on this day, and it'll show up and say.
So you're planning to use that for yourself, or you were planning to share it then with the kids so they can then see what they need to do?
It's in the phone, but also you can look at your account on the computer.
Okay.
But also, it's the little things that make a difference, Alison. And with this app, when you open the recipe, it doesn't time out your screen. So your screen stays on if you're in the recipe. And
so when you've got wet hands covered in everything like onion and garlic,
I don't know what you're talking about.
You don't have to press the screen again.
Yeah. It also puts the recipe in an easy printable format. And what Rebecca does is she prints hers off and puts it in a notebook, kind of like we have our kitchen canons and stuff.
Yeah.
I haven't done that for now. I'm still kind of just getting the hang of using the app and sort of tweaking things that I put in to be just the way we like them. But I've been using the podcast cookbook very heavily because if anybody has seen our podcast cookbook, it's basically like Alison's and my core recipes that a lot of our kitchen rotates around. And then my intent is that I can either hand the phone to a kid or to a friend and say, could you make this? And everything is in there. The other thing it does is when you plug in, like if I put lacto fermented oats on the menu for tomorrow, it has a shopping page. So it shows you everything you would need for the next 7 days to make all those recipes. And the way I use that page is I can scroll down that page, and if you tap an item, like it says 2 cups of oats, and then I tap it and it just disappears. So I'm like, okay, I know I've got that in the pantry. I've got that in the pantry. That needs to come out of the freezer. That's in a bucket underneath 12 other buckets, and somebody's going to need to get it out and bring it inside. And then there might be some things I need to buy. Like I'm not growing radishes. I'm not growing lettuce. Now that those things are being harvested around here, I put those in, and then when I do our milk drop, I pass by our favorite farm stand. And so I just pull into the farm stand and I'm like, okay, I need radishes, I need this. And I can just check them off the list as I go down. So I don't have to, it has taken an entire aspect of thinking out. And I feel like it's helpful to my budget. And I know other people who have used it have said the same thing, because instead of saying, I don't know, maybe, well, you plan. So this, don't listen to this part, Alison. But if I'm like, I don't know how many radishes I need, I guess I'll get all of these, and, but then I don't really need that many. Then when I get home, I'm like, okay, I've got a lot of radishes, but now I already know which meals have radishes in them and about how much.
Yeah.
And so I can really get specific, which probably is normal for everybody else, but is not normal for me.
I think I work slightly differently. I would just see the radishes and think I like them and buy the quantity that appeals to me, and then I would just use the radishes. So
yeah,
if I had some in a salad, I'd use some, and then if there were some left over, I'd bung them in a thing and roast them with some squash the next day, that kind of thing.
And that's typically how I have done things. But the way that doesn't work is when I'm telling somebody else, well, there's about 12 things I was inspired by in my kitchen. Yes. And could you turn them into a meal, please? And so what I've realized is I can't communicate. Like this is what I was telling Rebecca, was there's plenty of times where I just go in the kitchen and I'm like, oh, let's just start this. And then something magical happens. I'm like, that was amazing. I would never have planned that, right? But I have to somehow turn that over to an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very different.
And cooking in somebody else's kitchen where you have no idea what's in there, even if all the food is something you can eat, but if you don't know what it is, then it's kind of paralyzing. Yeah. So, and then I made a lot of the lists. I wrote something like either sweet potatoes or chard or like 12 different things. And then when that pops up on my shopping list, it's like, well, which one of those is in stock right now? Pick that one. You just need something like a substantial carb to go with this or something. So anyway, so trying to get my brain out of my head, pass along to other people in anticipation of the postpartum season. Maybe I didn't survive season so well, but I'm trying to do better with postpartum and just telling the kids what to expect, and definitely telling them they'll be bringing me food in bed and all of that.
Good.
So,
hey, you washing the dishes. Been there. You've heard Alison and I talk over and over about her love of rye sourdough bread. Well, I might actually call it an obsession, but that's neither here nor there. Now you can make Alison's rye sourdough in your own kitchen with her as your teacher. And she's a really good teacher. Rye is economical, it's delicious, and full of nutrients and low in gluten. There's a reason why it has been a darling of bread bakers for centuries. Make it into sourdough, as Alison will show you in her course, Rye Sourdough Bread, Mastering the Basics. And you've got an amazing, tasty, and nutritious staple in your kitchen. It's traditional and it's nutritional. In this course, you'll learn everything there is to know about how she creates and maintains her rye sourdough starter, all about whole grain sourdough rye, including the key differences between baking with rye and wheat, how to make 2 loaves, an everyday rye sandwich bread, and a delicious Russian-style dark rye loaf, and what to do with your sourdough discard, including video walkthroughs for sourdough pancakes and a tasty, sweet, spiced cake. Head to www.ancestralkitchen.com/rye.
Alison, we're really close to time, so I wanted to ask you one more question about what to do in unexpected times of sickness. So, Alison, when sickness strikes, how do you guys cope with eating
during that?
So sickness is kind of a bit more like your, morning sickness, rather than being busy. And so, again, I'm like you've been, I'm relying on what's around me and who's around me. So I rely on Rob a lot to take over things. I mean, we've been together 15 years now, and so he's had 15 years of my training. And things tend to go into an emergency mode, So whereas on a normal week or fortnight, we might be making one rye bread, one spelt bread, and one other type of bread. When we're in emergency mode, we're just making bread. Just a bread. And get it out,
Yep.
And he knows how to make bread. And we will have simple cooked grains. So we'll just have, for example, porridge in the morning and millet in the evening, which along with the bread, that's our carb for 3 meals. We often heat up leftovers with a bit of stock. I'll put in the resources the recipe for my bone broth bowl, which you shouldn't say quickly because it's very difficult.
Oh, good.
And that is a simple, literally leftover millet, stock, and then you put in whatever's in the fridge. Boiled eggs, we eat a lot of, Rob and I, in emergency mode. Simple, very, very simple meat cuts. And Rob can do all of that. I like to have things in the freezer for emergencies if I can. There's not much room in the freezer, but I would always like to have broth, soups, and perhaps a container of stew in the freezer. So again, it's about being really simple. And I would say the same thing applies, if you're going through a busy time, if you're going through a busy time with work, where you're going to be working late every night, or you've got friends coming over and you want to spend time out with them in the evening, so you haven't got time to do your usual prep that you would do in the kitchen in the evenings, or you've got a time where there's a deadline, something like that. It's a similar thing for all of these moments, Ancestral food does not have to be complicated. And so at those times, whether it's something that's coming from the outside or an illness that's happening, simplify, put things on repeat, make the things that you can do really easily. And if you have other people living with you, try to teach them those simple things so that they can then do those things for you if you do get ill. How about you, Andrew? What happens with sickness in your house? Is it a similar story?
Well, yes. And I think what you said about the simple cooked grains was good because that is something that was very easy to have the kids do, which was our grains was kind of porridge out of oatmeal or rice.
Okay.
And that's easy. Easily digestible things. I would say anything GAPS style so that your digestive system isn't working hard. Or if you have postpartum cookbooks, those tend to run along the lines of GAPS a lot of the times. So easy to digest foods to take pressure off your digestive system when you're sick. It's good if you have them already made. We did have some GAPS soups already made in the freezer, which we did go through. And then we have canned a ton of broth. So having broth on hand that I don't have to tell the kids, go get this out of the freezer, get these bones, put this in. All I have to do is say, go get a can off the shelf, not a can, a jar.
Yeah.
And open it up. That helps because, if you have a bowl of broth, like you said with the bone broth bowl, the triple B, and you can just stick anything in it and make it into a meal. And then if you have kids, this is like you said, training people around you, train the kids from a young age and letting go of being completely incapacitated is a great way to let go of control.
Yeah, completely.
So you and I have both enjoyed that spiritual lesson this past year.
And sometimes it will push me forward in my need to let go of control. I'll be there clinging on tightly, and then the illness will come and wipe me out, and I'll realise that I can let go of control, or that I really should be letting go of control, that I actually want to let go of control. And so there's some blessing in the illness.
And that is good for them if you let go of control. Because if I'm always hovering or nitpicking or whatever, like, no, scrape it like that, then they never get to fail a little bit, fail forward, try things. But that the kids did a lot of the cooking. So maybe they didn't heat the pan just the way I would heat it and something stuck to it. Like, is it the end of the world? Guess what? It's not the end of the world. So yeah, teach them to be able to do tasks that you can cash in on later. And you'll be really grateful that you did. So I'm just happy when everybody has something to eat. And simple. This is simple time.
Motto. That's the motto.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So do you want to take us to the bridge or to the end?
Yeah, I think let's take us to our conclusion. So check out the show notes because we put some resources in there for you guys, including I put in some books that I've found useful during this time.
Okay.
So Angie, who's a patron, her pressure canning book, she has meals as well as how to can broths and beans and things like that in there, which we're doing some beans coming up next. So that because I thought, having beans cooked on hand would be really handy. And there's not a lot of room in the freezer now that there's a steer and 2 pigs and 30 turkeys and 100 chickens in there. So we are going to can some beans following Angie's instructions. Also, I put in a postpartum cooking book that I have been using as well and having the family members use so that they know what to do. So it isn't easy maintaining your ancestral food during these times because our modern world is basically at this point no longer built for ancestral needs. So the structures that we would have once relied upon no longer exist. And it's really built for a different way of eating. And you and I know we often live far away from the people we have found who cook similarly. And farms, when you're moving, it takes a lot of effort and a relationship to build your connection with the farm.
Yeah.
But I think our best tool is planning ahead and anticipating that those times will come. And if the excuse immediately springs to your mind, as it does to mine, I don't know, I was going to get pregnant. Well, you kind of assumed that something would happen. I could have guessed. So knowing I had things prepared ahead, but not 40 weeks worth. And if we have some things stored ahead, which we did have a fair amount of, canned food and things like that we had made that we did go through, but also intentionally building a community, and which is kind of like when you have a sourdough starter, Alison, and you give a little bit to everybody you know, and then when you don't bake bread for 6 months and you forgot you even had a sourdough starter, like I don't know who that would ever happen to, but anybody on this podcast, and somebody else has some and they can give it back to you.
Yeah.
And you can start yours over again. And ancestral food is a part of a community. Using your ancestral methods of storage and preparation, like dehydration, is a good one. Ancestral people would also dehydrate meat even to be able to bring along. So that's something you can do if you need pocket food. And then being okay with eating very, very simply boring food.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really a good thing to end on. Simple, and then in brackets, and boring. Because it's not going to be forever.
Yep, that's okay.
Wonderful.
Okay, Alison, you ready to climb out of your stack of boxes?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, and go up and find some food. Yeah. Thanks very much, Andrea.
Oh, so good to talk to you, Alison.
Thank you so much for listening. We'd love to continue the conversation. Come find us on Instagram. Andrea's at Farm and Hearth and Alison's at ancestral_kitchen. Until next time, we both wish you much fun, exploration, and satisfaction in and out of the kitchen.